The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Hinkler.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And we've seen the third instalment of Jimbonomics in the most recent budget. First instalment was last October. The second instalment of Jimbonomics, of course, was the treatise that we all saw, some 6,000 words from memory, and the Labor Treasurer is going to change the way that economies work and economics work and business works. It'll be quite an extraordinary effort, to be frank. And what we've seen in this latest implementation of the Jimbonomic plan from the Labor Treasurer is very, very straightforward. We have the Reserve Bank of Australia, who has their foot on the brake of inflation, and we have the federal Labor Treasurer with his foot on the accelerator. And we saw in the most recent budget an increase in expenditure of $185 billion in the forwards. $185 billion. And what's one of the fundamental tenets of Jimbonomics? Well, that is to take money from those that have earned it and deliver it to those who want it. And quite simply, Mr Deputy Speaker, the people who have got it in the neck in the most recent budget is Middle Australia, the taxpayers of this country. And in my electorate, the ones who desperately need support when we have raging inflation, some 7%. We've seen the price of a loaf of bread go up by as much as 70%. The value of their money is worth less now than it was a year ago, substantially. And what did those opposite do? Well, the government decided not to deliver the low-income tax offset for 51,000 people in my electorate. 51,000 who would desperately need up to $1,500 when they do their tax return. And these are people who are out there working hard. They are paying their taxes. And now they've seen increases in their electricity costs, their gas prices, their rates, their food, their fuel. And included in the most recent budget is an increase in the cost of transport, an attack on the cost of fuel for people who deliver almost everything in this country. No matter whether it's food or white goods or televisions, they arrive on truck transport. And every time the cost of that transport goes up, it is paid for by the people who purchase those products. So inflation will continue to skyrocket under this government because they simply don't know how to manage it. So the Reserve Bank is doing their best, and it is incredibly difficult for mortgage holders. It is incredibly difficult because interest rates keep going up because this government can't get a hold of inflation. Now, what else do we see in order for the new Treasurer to be able to spruik his wares? Well, they have delayed infrastructure funding substantially. Infrastructure that is critical for productivity, that is critical for road safety, that was a $120 billion plan of the coalition. Well, that has all been stalled for two reasons. One, because they don't want it in the budget and they've pushed it out into the outlier years, and two, because it is now under review for many, many programs, including things like Roads to Recovery, the Bridges program, Black Spots, the National Heavy Vehicle Road Safety program. And Mr Deputy Speaker, in the regions I come from, these programs are relied upon by local government in particular because it's the way that they actually fix this infrastructure. And guess what? If they don't have that money, that work still needs to be done, and it will be worn by the ratepayers of those local government areas. And my two major councils, the Bundaberg Council and the Fraser Coast Regional Council, got it in the neck in the Queensland State Labor Government review for the financial assistance grants that go to those local governments. Those decisions are made by a Queensland Labor Government committee. The coalition increased funding by some $70 million, and they have now been cut by millions of dollars to these two major councils that has to be paid for by ratepayers. It is another increase in taxes for those hard-working individuals. Mr Deputy Speaker, the people I represent, they do not have readily available cash. They don't. They have one of the lowest per capita incomes in the country. They simply cannot pay these increases in electricity, in cost for logistics, in cost for food. They don't have the available money. Now, here is the two sides of the Labor Party, Mr Deputy Speaker. I have correspondence from Minister King, in writing, that says that the federal Labor government will honour the existing commitments in the Hinkler Regional Deal. And I took her at her word. I thought, well, that's good. These are important projects. They're moving through the process. Many of them are contracted. Many of them are underway. Many of them close to being done. And I thought, well, that's great. That is good for the local people. Imagine my surprise, Mr Deputy Speaker, to find that they're on the cut list. We have a number of projects named in the media who have been listed as now under review. Now, when inquiries were made of the Minister's office, guess what the response was that came back? That guarantee is a starting position for the Labor government. A starting position. This is incredible. So you have a correspondence that says you will honour the deal, followed by a statement from, I assume, the media advisor in the Minister's office that says a guarantee is a starting position. Now, I'm pretty sure if you look up the definition, whether it's on Wikipedia or on the Macquarie Dictionary, a guarantee is a guarantee. It is not a starting position. And the people that I represent expect these commitments to be honoured because they are important. They are incredibly important. If we look at what happens with road infrastructure right now, Mr Deputy Speaker, we have had 2 lots of fatalities in the region in the last 48 hours. A 5-person crash on Goodwood Road and a fatality on the Bruce Highway north of my patch in Gingin in the member for Flynn's area today. And this, unfortunately, is a regular occurrence. This infrastructure money needs to be spent, not delayed. It needs to be spent. You cannot expect ratepayers to wear the increase in costs for this infrastructure. It is incredible that they would even look to review it. And then I come to one of the major drivers of my economy, Mr Deputy Speaker, and that is the Paradise Dam. We saw a commitment from the Labor government to match the $600 million, and it's guaranteed. Now, is it the same guarantee that we got on the Hinkler Regional deal, one that's a starting position, or is it a real guarantee? Now, I've asked the Minister's office for the profile for funding for Paradise Dam. This is an enormous project. It is critical to agriculture in the region. You cannot grow tree crops, for example, without a guarantee of water, because guess what? They die, and they take 7 to 9 years to get to the point of peak production. And that is why, Mr Deputy Speaker, it is so important that the federal Labor government actually honours their commitments, because if they do not, people will not invest. They will not invest.
Order.
So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I have 51,000 people who are missing out on the low-income tax offset. I have an enormous agricultural sector that is relying on the Paradise Dam to be rebuilt, and let's place the blame where it should be. The Queensland Labor government built this dam.
Order.
They built it to a price and not a standard, and it failed. It is the biggest infrastructure failure in this country's history. It is incredible that we are at this point. It basically has to be rebuilt. But the water that is in there is critical to investment in my region, because no one invests without water security and water reliability. They have spent an enormous amount of time and money over the last decade putting in place avocado plantations, macadamia nut plantations. We're the biggest producers of macadamia nuts in the country, a major export crop. It goes to countries like China and everywhere else, and they cannot have a guarantee not being met on a commitment for funding for Paradise Dam. So I say again to the Minister, what is your word worth? What is a guarantee worth? What is something in writing worth? And it's pretty clear at the moment, absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, what is it that we delivered for my local electorate? Well, we delivered connecting infrastructure, important connecting infrastructure that builds our economy, not things that knock it around, not increases in electricity prices, not increases in gas prices, not interventions in markets. And if we look at something like the common user infrastructure at the Port of Bundaberg, a project that was originally scheduled to cost $10 million, but through Labor delays in Queensland of years, it's now $17.7 million. I secured that money in the last budget for the Coalition. It's underway. And guess who did the sod turning, Mr Deputy Speaker? Guess who did the sod turning? The local state Labor member who was opposed. They didn't want to build this. And what we see now is we have organisations and businesses who are looking to utilise this infrastructure for exports and imports into the Bundaberg port, a port which is unfortunately terribly underutilised. We have a sugar industry which is in decline. It was the major user. And we now have an opportunity for other organisations to be able to load at the port in a way which is competitive with the international markets, which is competitive in terms of pricing, which means they will invest in the local port because it's the right thing to do. It's close to their facilities. It's a benefit for all. So we saw the Palaszczuk government, Mr Deputy Speaker, declare the Port of Bundaberg as a state development area, would you believe, in February 2017. 2017. That conveyor is under construction right now. And it took years for the approval. It is quite incredible, the delays. And another project, the Pacific Marine Base at the Bundaberg Port. We secured $6 million from the Building Better Regions Fund. It is a roll-on, roll-off facility and commercial vessel wharf for the temporary berth of vessels undergoing maintenance, and it has a great potential to deliver trade into the Pacific. And that is important for my local region because it means they can export their products directly to the Pacific. And what a great arrangement. But, once again, held up by the Queensland State Labor Government in terms of signing the agreements, in terms of giving approvals for years. Years. But a similar wharf, Mr Deputy Speaker, in Brisbane, would you believe, my understanding was approved in 12 weeks. 12 weeks if you're in the city, years if you are in Bundaberg and in the regions. We have the Torbanlea Payable Flood Road Immunity Upgrade under the regional deal underway right now. It's underway right now. $24 million from the Commonwealth on an 80-20 split. That will ensure that there is an all-weather access road between Hervey Bay and the Bruce Highway. It means that they won't be cut by floods. They won't lose their access to what is the lifeline for Queensland and the Bruce Highway. It is an important road. It is that critical because if you want to transport product, if you want to get to a hospital by road, if you want to get to services which are not in your town, it is the Bruce Highway that takes you there in coastal Queensland. We have the Boundary Road Extension Upgrade as part of the Hinkler Regional Deal, $7.7 million. It's a $26.5 million project. It will provide a relief in terms of cross Hervey Bay traffic, provides them another option, particularly an option for those who might need access to emergency services. It will get them to the hospital faster, it will be safer, it will be better for all people that live down there. In black spot programs, we've had a number of black spot programs over the years, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm still astounded that there's even any risk at all that a very long-standing policy, which is relied on by nearly every council I can think of right across the country, would even have a question mark against it as being delivered over the forwards. There is so much traffic build-up. We have enormous increases in terms of the population. Hervey Bay alone is growing, I'm told, at some 7% a year. Now, that is very, very high. Upgrades to the Bruce Highway between Maryborough and Torbanlea, we have $103 million at Aldershot. Once again, guess what? Delivered by the Coalition Government, opened by the Queensland Labor Government, so much so they didn't even bother to invite us, Mr Deputy Speaker. But the member for Wide Bay and I weren't offended. We held our own opening ceremony, and that was very well received, I'm sure. But these are important upgrades. And I heard the member for Blair's contribution earlier. And the idea that these things are only applied to coalition electorate. Who do they think uses the road? No one checks to see who you vote for before you go on the Bruce Highway. It is a benefit for all Australians and all Queenslanders. The idea that this infrastructure is for some specific group is just outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. So the Bruce Highway continues to need upgrades in areas. I'm very pleased to see that the Gympie bypass is coming close to fruition. That is a very strategic upgrade, but once again it was one that we committed in 2016 and took years for the Queensland Labor Government to actually deliver. In my own patch, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Royal Flying Doctor Service Aviation Training Facility, another part of the Hinkler Regional Deal. The RFDS pilots will come from across Australia to train on the new Beechcraft King Air 360 flight simulator. They all have to sleep somewhere, they've all got to eat somewhere, they'll all shop, they'll all utilise the local facilities. $15 million from the Hinkler Region deal for this project. It's underway. Tilt-up panels are up. Murchie Construction's a local contractor won the contract, which I'm very pleased about, and it should be ready and open by the end of the year. It complements the RFDS Life Flight facility, which is right next door, and this is what it looks like, Mr Deputy Speaker, when you think about linking infrastructure to build your economy. This is what it looks like. We have seen cuts by the Labor Party in the most recent budget of the Entrepreneurship Facilitator program. Now, since 2019, Regional Business HQ has supported 1,300 businesses across the region. They were under contract, 1 year in of a 3-year contract, and it is being cut by this federal Labor government. Can you imagine what confidence that gives to everyone out there that utilises funding, Mr Deputy Speaker? They engage on the basis that the contracts will be honoured. They make decisions around equipment and infrastructure and staffing based on those 3-year contracts, and the rug has been pulled out from under them 2 years early with an existing contract. It is just outrageous, absolutely outrageous. Now, I don't need to bang on about the $275 because it'll never be delivered. That will never show up. We have seen 10 interest rate rises under this Labor government, and I'll go back to where I started, Mr Deputy Speaker. The RBA has its foot on the brake for inflation, and it hurts mortgage holders. but this Labor government has its foot on the inflation accelerator, and that is not in the national interest or the interest of our economy.